Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The Beverly Liggett case, madness by inheritance, when a favorite son becomes an executioner. Genetics, unfortunately, is inextricably linked to many diseases that are inherited. These include some mental disorders. However, even an existing predisposition is only a risk and probability, but not a guarantee that the child will inherit this or that ailment. Naturally, every parent hopes that the children will take from him only the best, and diseases will bypass offspring. Many experts say that there are no specific genes for the transmission of mental illness. That is, no one gene is necessary or sufficient to provoke the disease. Nevertheless, mental illness tends to run in families. This is exactly the problem faced by our heroine today, Beverly Liggett, who sincerely believed that her children would not be affected by such an affliction. And indeed, Beverly's daughter grew up a perfectly healthy and balanced woman, but the son, apparently, took a double blow, in which he blamed solely on his mother. It should be noted that the presence of a mental disorder did not affect the intelligence of this guy. On the contrary, he was very clever and calculating, from which the atrocities committed by him look even more sickeningly creepy. Who is Beverly Liggett? Beverly Liggett was born on the 1st of October 1956 in the capital of Colorado, a picturesque metropolis called Denver. She was raised with her older brother Stephen and sister Martha in an ordinary family of Barbara and Edwin Liggett, who lived all their lives in their hometown, almost never leaving its boundaries. After graduating from high school, Beverly went to a local college, but here she could not go to university for a variety of reasons, partly related to her health. In her youth, the girl worked as a salesman, but after she married at the age of 26 and gave birth to 2 children, she devoted herself to her family for many years and was exclusively engaged in raising heirs and creating a home. In 1988, Beverly had a long-awaited firstborn son, Ari, and a few years later, a daughter, Libby, was born. The young woman literally did not care about her heirs and lived for them. However, in the second half of the 90s, her marriage broke up. The husband left the family, moved to another state, and was no longer interested in the fate of his ex-wife and did not take any part in the lives of children. Beverly was forced to take 2 jobs at once, but thanks to her diligence and determination, the family of 3 did not need anything. She and her children moved to the suburbs of Denver, a small and relatively young, founded in 2001 town centennial, where they rented a cozy, spacious house. In the mid-2000s, Beverly, on one of the dating sites, met a man named Seth Missy, with whom they had a correspondence, which grew into a romantic relationship. It was he who inspired her lover to finally fulfill her dream and pursue higher education. Liggett chose medical school because she always dreamed of helping other people and felt that in this lies her calling. At that time, she was already over 50 years old, and in the group she was twice as old as her fellow students. However, she easily found a common language with them and is remembered by all as sociable, attentive, and responsible miniature brunette, who was nicknamed Caring Angel. Beverly and Seth's romance lasted about 5 years before the couple decided to officially legalize their relationship. For both of them, the step was a serious one, but they were ready for it. Beverly was happy, as she finally had a college degree, had a better-paying job, and was about to marry the man she loved. Her children were old enough by then to be on their own, but her son Ari was a source of genuine anxiety and apprehension, and there were a number of good reasons for that. A hereditary disease. There was a sensitive issue in the Liggett family that they tried hard to hide from others and never discussed with outsiders. The fact that Beverly and her sister Martha from an early age suffered from bipolar affective disorder, which is characterized by frequent changes in mood phases, from manic to depressive. From time to time, the disorder was exacerbated. But if Martha experienced minor discomfort associated with this disorder, and the prescribed medication quickly gave positive results, Beverly sometimes needed hospital treatment because she was on the verge of voluntarily taking her own life. It was for this reason that she was unable to go to university in her time, and for the same reason the marriage with the father of her children broke up. It is also worth noting that her mother, Barbara too, was subject to prolonged depression, but she faced this problem in the 40s, and then the woman no one in time did not provide qualified help. and so she was forced to fight her illness on her own for almost all her life. Beverly was sure that the mental disorder in their family is transmitted exclusively through the female line because the disease manifested itself in her mother, her and her sister, while her brother Stephen remained completely normal. In this regard, Beverly feared for the health of her daughter Libby, but just the daughter of the disease bypassed, hitting with redoubled force on Ari, the special child. From early childhood, Ari was a rather strange, withdrawn boy prone to tantrums. At the age of 5, he was diagnosed with autism, and later a whole host of other mental disorders and abnormalities were added. He could withdraw into himself, and completely abstracted from what was going on around him. But such states, as a rule, alternated with attacks of aggression. Despite his mental problems, Ari went to a normal high school, where he studied quite well. Particularly easy to give him the exact sciences. In particular, he was fond of chemistry and physics. The boy easily solved complex problems, and most calculations were made in his mind. His intelligence was above average, but his social and communication skills were practically absent. Classmates avoided the strange and unsociable peer, or simply mocked him. Ari had no friends at all, was not eager to learn about the world around him, was aggressive and violent, which manifested itself in cruelty to animals and attacks on other children. The boy was repeatedly hospitalized and prescribed medication to correct his condition, but at home he usually stopped taking the prescribed medication and soon returned to his previous state. His parents tried to control him to take the necessary pills, but the older he got, the more difficult it was to do so. He did not know how to ask or talk calmly, and he always got what he wanted with tantrums. The boy could shut himself in and not talk to anyone for weeks, but could talk for hours to himself or to some imaginary interlocutor. In periods of aggravation, he became dangerous to others, and his relatives sometimes insisted on his compulsory hospitalization. A dangerous teenager. As a teenager, Ari learned that his mother, aunt, and grandmother also suffered from mental health problems, and his mother had to be hospitalized at times. During that period, Ari literally hated his mother and blamed her for all of his troubles. He believed that she had awarded him with a disease that was ruining his life. The young man became increasingly uncontrollable. He threatened his loved ones with violence and constantly wondered why his own sister, family curse, bypassed. Being with him under the same roof was becoming unsafe, and the first could not stand the head of the family. He filed for divorce and literally escaped. Despite his diagnosis, Ari was easily able to enter the university, receiving a high passing score. However, the guy was expelled in his first year after he brought a homemade firearm to the institution and threatened a fellow student with death. At that time, he was arrested for the first time, but only got off with an educational talk, confiscation of the weapon, and expulsion from the university. About a year later, the police were contacted by Beverly and asked to come to their home immediately to subdue her son, who was threatening to kill her and her daughter and appeared to be very serious. But the police handed the violent young man into the hands of psychiatrists, and those, after a short treatment in the hospital, released him home, prescribing medication, which Ari, of course, did not take. Hateful stepfather. Ari was 18 years old when Beverly met Seth and began dating him. Soon the couple decided to live together, but Ari, from the very beginning, took his mother's new chosen one in the bayonet. He tried in every possible way to get him out of the house, threatened, scandalized, and even started fights. The appearance of another man in the house young man perceived as a personal insult and betrayal by his mother. Seth, as best he could, tried to support his beloved. He looked for specialists who could help the young man, paid for his treatment in clinics, but the more he tried, the more Ari hated him. The very thought of this man becoming his stepfather and part of their family frightened and depressed Ari, making him aggressive and dangerous. Seth Missy repeatedly told his wife that her son was old enough to live on his own. He could study or work and be like everyone else if he took his medication properly. Beverly Liggett herself was well aware of this, but she loved her son and could not leave him or kick him out, so she continued to endanger her own life. Obsession with guns. As time went on, the young man's hobbies became more and more bizarre, sophisticated, and dangerous. He had a weakness for weapons, and to be more precise, was literally obsessed with them. In the basement of his own house, he collected homemade firearms literally from improvised materials, as they say, on his knees, which once again proved that the guy was very smart, clever, and enterprising. But Ari was not limited to one weapon and got the idea to create an explosive device. He found all the information he was interested in on the internet, bought or ordered the components he needed, and the substances he couldn't get. He decided to synthesize at home himself, using his deep knowledge of chemistry. The mother found her son in the backyard of the house. Beverly was suspicious, and since her son did not answer questions and behaved strangely, she immediately called the police. As it turned out, she did it in time because during the search, the police found in the house almost ready bomb. In addition, they found and confiscated a modified rifle, several pistols assembled from parts of different models, a silencer, and a lot of spare parts for weapons. When Ari's computer search history for the past few months was reviewed and studied, the FBI became seriously interested in the young man, as they suspected that he was preparing a large-scale crime. In addition, in Ari's room on the shelves were numerous jars of poisonous substances, including arsenic and potassium cyanide. He himself could not clearly explain why he had purchased them. The young man was arrested the same day, but was only charged with a misdemeanor possession of weapons and careless handling of dangerous chemicals that could cause death or serious injury. But Ari pleaded guilty, cooperated with the investigation, and received only a 1-year suspended sentence, after which he returned to his home, where he again began to terrorize his mother, sister, and Seth. The threat of reprisals and the indifference of the medical profession. After his arrest and suspended sentence, Ari literally went mad with anger and hatred. Not a day went by that he didn't threaten to kill his family in their sleep or burn down their house after locking everyone in there. Then Ari was hospitalized again and spent about 3 months in the walls of a psychiatric hospital. Doctors, in addition to earlier diagnoses, revealed signs of schizophrenia and acute psychosis in the young man. After another course of treatment, the young man became quiet for a while and went into himself again. He did not talk to anyone, spent most of his time in his room at his computer, and seemed to take his prescribed medication faithfully. But only a month later, he had another breakdown, which was triggered by the news of his mother and Seth's upcoming wedding. Ari also overheard Ari talking about his mother and stepfather, planning to buy their own house in another state, move there, and start their lives over. Libby's sister had already moved out with her boyfriend, which meant Ari would be on his own. The 25-year-old guy was not happy about it. The young man literally went crazy. He threw his mother a tantrum, screamed, waved a knife in front of her, threatened to kill her and make sure that the body would never be found. Beverly immediately called the psychiatric hospital, told them everything, and asked for her son to be forcibly hospitalized again. But the attending physician was dismissive of her request, believing that there was no reason to do so, and that the last course of treatment had yielded positive results, so that Ari, in his opinion, did not pose a threat to others. That same evening, Beverly had one last conversation with Seth, who was in another city for work, and was unable to come to her immediately. Beverly's mysterious disappearance. On the 14th of October 2012, less than 2 weeks after the woman celebrated her 56th birthday, she mysteriously disappeared. She failed to turn up for hospital duty that day, something that had never happened before. Colleagues were the first to sound the alarm. After failing to call his lover and receiving no response to his numerous messages, Seth dialed Libby's number to find out when she had last spoken to her mother. As it turned out, Libby had also been trying to call her unsuccessfully since morning. Seth called the house phone, and what he heard horrified him. The phone was picked up by Ari, who unsuccessfully tried to copy his mother's voice, pretending to be her and claiming that she was fine. Seth immediately contacted the police and asked them to send a unit to their home as soon as possible. However, when the police arrived, they found that no one was home, and they could not find a good reason to break in at that time. Therefore, the only attempts made that day were to trace Beverly's phone signal and check her bank card activity. Since Beverly's car was also missing, it was put on a statewide manhunt, and it was the vehicle that led to a lead just 2 days later. when a patrolman spotted it in a Denver suburb and decided to check the paperwork and see if it was the right car. A creepy find in the boot. The car seemed strange to the police officer even before he checked the license plate number and made sure it belonged to the missing woman. When the last doubts were gone, the police officer approached the driver and asked for identification. The driver was a young man with long hair that partially covered his face. He was visibly nervous, and when he was asked to show his documents again, he simply pushed the throttle to the floor, sped off, and sped down the road at full speed. The police officer began to chase the fugitive and radioed for backup. But just a couple of minutes later, while trying to make a sharp turn at high speed, the car skidded, went off the road, and hit a tree. The driver was wearing a seatbelt, and the airbags deployed, leaving him unharmed. Ari tried to run away, but was thrown to the ground by police officers as soon as he left the vehicle. On examining the vehicle, the police found several large, sealed plastic containers in the boot of the vehicle, which they opened to their shock and horror. Inside were fragments of a dismembered female body, covered with a strange-smelling, murky liquid. The interrogation and the killer's attempts to evade responsibility. Once Ari was brought to the station for questioning, he stated that he had schizophrenia, autism, psychosis, and bipolar affective disorder, as his psychiatrist could confirm. He also added that he was unable to distinguish between right and wrong because of his diagnoses, so he did not know what he was doing. He then asked whether he would be tried if his diagnoses were confirmed and what punishment he would face. Ari categorically refused to plead guilty. During interrogations, he would call himself a god or claim that he was possessed by demons and needed the help of an exorcist. At times, Ari's speech became incoherent, as if he began to talk to an invisible interlocutor, completely ignoring the police. The psychiatric examination confirmed that the accused indeed suffers from a number of mental disorders, but at the same time, it was proved that he is quite able to give an account of his actions. Also during the interrogations, the psychiatrist who observed the guy's behavior concluded that even when talking to himself, he always listened attentively to what was being said to him and what questions were being asked. This was evident from his reactions, clarifications, and sudden mood swings. The main reason why Ari was so vividly and demonstratively showing his insanity was an attempt to avoid severe punishment and minimize his responsibility before the law. He was clever and intelligent enough, so he tried to confuse the investigation and convince others of his insanity. The investigation and the unexpected results of the search. Despite the fact that from the very beginning, no one doubted that Ari had committed a terrible crime, his guilt had to be proved, and this required hard evidence. It was decided to start with a search in their family home, where, as expected, the murder took place. There, the police found washed-up traces of blood on the kitchen floor, in the corridor, and in the bathroom. In the dishwasher lay a bloody hacksaw, which the young man had apparently used to cut up his mother's body. The place for this gruesome act was the bathtub, which had numerous jagged chips on its edges. The expert examination showed that Beverly was poisoned with potassium cyanide, and after her death, her body was dismembered with a hacksaw and packed into containers. Vials with the said poisonous substance were found in the kitchen, in Ari's room, as well as in the basement of the house, where the guy had a kind of chemical laboratory. In addition, in his bedroom, under the bed was found the corpse of Beverly's favorite cat, which was also poisoned with poison. This suggested that the perpetrator first practiced on the animal before killing the mother. By the way, remember the strange liquid in which the fragments of the dismembered body were placed? As it turned out, it had a special chemical composition, which is able to accelerate the process of decomposition of tissue. Ari found the recipe on the internet and decided to literally dissolve the corpse and hide the bones in the mountains so that they would never be found. A picture of the crime and the killer's justification. Based on all the evidence found, the following picture of the massacre emerged. On the eve of the tragedy, Ari had a big row with his mother and threatened to kill her again. He was so convincing that Beverly, seriously afraid for her life, called her son's psychiatrist with a request to immediately hospitalize him. However, the specialist ignored the request, believing that his patient was not dangerous to others. In the evening, the young man having previously tested the effects of the poison on a cat, poisoned his mother, took her body to the bathroom, and began to cut it up with a hacksaw. How he got his mother to take potassium cyanide remains a mystery to this day. It probably took Ari all night to complete the gruesome job because in the morning, when Seth called the house phone, the perpetrator was still in the house. Ari then carelessly cleaned up the blood, stuffed the saw into the dishwasher, and packed the body into several containers filled with chemicals. He took the containers to the boot of his mother's car, which he used to leave the house. The further events are already known to you. When this version was presented to the defendant, supported by hard evidence, he suddenly began to justify himself and change his testimony. Ari stated that his mother took her own life by taking the poison voluntarily, and he only found her lifeless body. According to the guy, he was greatly afraid that he would be left without means of subsistence, as he himself did not work and lived at her expense. Then he decided to get rid of the body so that she would be considered missing. According to his plan, he himself was to remain living in the house and could continue to use the deceased's bank cards and accounts. The young man's story sounded wild and crazy. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that he was mentally ill, but it was also obvious that he had carefully planned the crime in advance. It was not a temporary insanity, a state of affect, or a fit of aggression. He had thought out every step and acted accordingly to the plan. One of the main evidences that the crime was pre-planned was Ari's possession of chemicals accelerating decomposition of the body, which he had purchased in advance. Moreover, according to his search history, he had studied them in detail months before the crime, the trial, and sentence. As I have already said, the psychiatric examination confirmed Ari's diagnoses, but the experts gave an unequivocal conclusion that he was aware of his actions and had carefully prepared in advance for the massacre of his mother. He himself continued to insist on his insanity, although he realized that it was useless to feign insanity. The trial took place in November of the same year, a month and a half after the crime that shook the entire state. Lawyers desperately tried to prove that the defendant cannot be criminally responsible because of his illness and needs treatment. Ari himself claimed that his mother hated him, so passed the hereditary disease to him, while his sister was completely normal. He also called himself a victim of crazy Beverly and blamed his parent for all his troubles. Seth appeared in court as a witness and said that his late lover, and he himself, frankly afraid of Ari because they did not know what to expect from him. He was incredibly cruel to others, showed sadistic tendencies, and refused to take prescribed medication to suppress outbursts of aggression. He also added that Beverly's fear for her son had transformed into her fear of her own son. The court found Ari Liggett guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of ever being eligible for parole. The jury unanimously found his actions to be cold-blooded and calculated. The 26-year-old defendant listened to his verdict in silence, his head down, and seemingly unconcerned. Libby Liggett, after the trial, admitted that she believed her brother was 100% guilty of what he had done. But at the same time, she noted that, perhaps, the tragedy could have been avoided if the specialists to whom the family repeatedly turned for help conscientiously performed their duties and in time to respond to the alarming messages Beverly. As of today, Ari Liggett is serving his life sentence in a Colorado state prison. All of his attempts to appeal and challenge the court's decision have been rejected. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell not to miss new stories from around the world. See you soon. Take care.